You're listening to Planet Vero Radio. I am Cindy Schwartz. We are broadcast on iHeartMedia, and we are also podcast on Spreaker. This is the Patient Partner Show, and I have my co-host Jeannie Roller on Skype with me. She's from Indiana. We're going to talk today, continuing the conversation that we had in another broadcast about the long-term impact of patient harm, and also a new topic that we, not a new topic, a new information that we talked about is called iatrogenic injury, which is what patient harm actually is. It's a technical term for the patient harm. And the legal field and the medical field know about it, even though we've said on many broadcasts that everyone tells us this doesn't happen. We don't treat patients like that. We personally know that that does happen, that we have seen it happen to us and how heinous it is. And so, Jeannie, we want to get to the same article that we were talking about on the other broadcast, written by Dr. Sigal K. Bell, who is at Harvard.
Okay. Well, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement is the place that published this article. It's called Addressing the Long-Term Impact of Patient Harm, and it was written by Dr. Bell March 7th of 2019, so it's very recent.
It is recent. So a couple of things that I took away from reading the article, and it was very informative, and it really helps people like us that have gotten medical harm, that do suffer from medical PTSD, from the heinous practices that we saw and then had done to us from the doctors and the medical staff that we went to for help. So one of the things that's key for us is that there are 4 types of long-term impact from this harm. And there's psychological impact, there is social and behavioral impact, there's prolonged physical impact, and there's also financial impact. And that's one thing that you never hardly ever hear about. And it's so desponding because that happened to me. I literally could not work for like 2 years because of the PTSD, because of the side effects from the drugs that I had for the surgery that I had. And no one would recognize it or listen to me. They're like, oh, yeah, so blah, 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 blah. Oh, we didn't do anything wrong. You came in with problems. So, I mean, those 4 things are very valid. And so let's talk about that.
Well, and one reason you cannot find this type of information is very, very hard to find because the medical community does not want to talk about it. They don't want to acknowledge that it happens. And there's an estimate of around 250 to 400,000 people a year that are killed by medical harm. That doesn't take into account the ones like you or my husband who were just, in quotes, injured. So, I mean, there's no accountability. There is no transparency. We need it. We have to have accountability. We have to have transparency. And
communication is the big thing. I mean, we have been saying that from day one when we started doing these broadcasts, and before we started doing it, just you and I together to try to bring our minds out of this. Where is the communication? It's like a brick wall. It's cut and dried. You're a patient number. What's your insurance policy next?
Right. For us, we didn't want money. We wanted an apology. We wanted to know what happened. We wanted them to talk to us. We wanted to know that in the future it wouldn't happen again.
Right.
But they just won't do that.
They won't do that. And what we've found from the scads and scads of lawyers that we've talked with is everyone is afraid of the lawsuit, of the malpractice. But yet on the other side, you're not going to get them. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. Neither of us are. But it's just things that we've learned along the highway that we've tried to bring closure to this. You're not going to get a lawsuit, snap your fingers, there you go, there's a medical malpractice lawsuit. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And especially for the most part, my opinion, unless somebody's died or severely maimed, or like that Larry Nassar case with the Olympic gymnasts and all of that. I mean, such heinous crimes, and that's exactly what they are. But that doesn't take away from the people where these, and they're not isolated, but they're one by 2, by 5 incidents that happen in these facilities by these same doctors, and nothing has gotten done.
Right. Well, and Dr. Bell, she's done so much research, and And one of the things that I like in this article is she wants to extend the definition of harm.
Right.
She wants to understand how it goes beyond whatever physical injury may have occurred, because you can see physical harm, but the mental harm that medical harm does, you cannot see usually.
Right. And the people literally suffer in silence. We both thought we were the only ones this happened to.
Right. And we weren't. But for a long time, we thought so.
Yeah, we each did until we found each other. We found each other. Just quick kudos to Misty Roberts at patientmodesty.org, because she has done this for how many, 10, 12, 15 years, trying to get to the bottom of why people aren't treated with respect and with dignity as a medical patient and as a nursing home patient.
Right. And one of the other things that Dr. Bell suggested is that they commit to long-term research timelines. But in order to do that, they have to admit that there is a problem, and they have to be willing to acknowledge it in order to research it. And that is the thing that they won't do. They won't acknowledge that there is a problem because they don't want to get into the medical malpractice. As I said, we didn't want money from him.
No.
We wanted justice.
Right. When I went back to the hospital that I went to in Orlando, Florida, I didn't want money either. I was trying to get to the bottom. And anyone out there, the listeners, if you suffer from PTSD, regardless of where the PTSD, the trauma happened, your mind wants to be put at ease and to have these pieces put together of a jigsaw puzzle that you're trying to figure out and trying to rationalize. And when you come across these brick walls, it just exacerbates this, and it just drives your mind into turmoil. And it's the worst thing you can do to somebody. It's just horrible to try to have to relive this over and over again, and you cannot get peace with it.
Right, exactly. And the other thing that Dr. Bell said is there needs to be prevention. But in order to have prevention, again, you have to have the medical community be able to admit there are issues.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, and people make mistakes. We all know that. People make mistakes, but people need to be educated. I mean, some of this stuff is intentional. A lot of it's intentional now from what we've seen.
Well, patient exposure is intentional.
Right.
It is not a mistake. It is not an oops. It is intentional.
Yep. And some of the drugs, too, we've talked about that in many other segments. These are powerful drugs, and we understand that they're necessary to be able to carry out these difficult surgeries, and that's a fabulous thing for people. Years ago, they couldn't do that. But you can't overuse these drugs. Just like we saw the oxy epidemic, we see the fentanyl epidemic. Yes, I know I've had the argument, that's street fentanyl. Okay. At the end of the day, when people become addicted to this stuff, they're going to get it wherever they can. And some people, just having a couple of doses of fentanyl or Versed, that puts them over the edge. You don't know what's going to happen with each person. So to be careful, to err on the side of caution, to me, would be the thing to do.
Right. And the last thing that Dr. Bell found is that they need to cultivate emotional intelligence and strong communication. Medical people have to be able to communicate to patients and really their families in a culture of respect. They have to respect the patient.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing, too, just to be add fuel to that fire, is the informed consent that we've talked about so many times, and the patient rights, that patients need to know the whole story.
Right.
To be able to make the decision. Yes, you're the doctor. I don't want to say withhold information because that's not the right term, but I mean, what that patient hopefully can withstand to be able to make the decision. But you can't make a decision as a patient when you don't have all the information.
Right. And my opinion is we need national standards of care. We need to stop the disrespect of the patient. And we need to make sure the patient is respected from the very start, from an office visit to the hospitalization to a nursing home or anything else that's medically related. We need to recognize that the patient is the captain of the health team, not the doctor, not the nurses. The patient is the captain. Everyone else is a player.
Right. And it is a consumer industry, as much as we don't want to say that. I mean, the medical industry, just like any other, is a consumer industry. You've been listening to Planet Vero Radio. I thank you for that. Please stay tuned.